Hello, true duelists, and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Single Card History, a series where I talk about some of the cards that have impacted Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout the years, and some of the other ones that didn't. Today's card, the sequel to one of the most versatile spell cards in the game that actually super secret kinda just sucked, Book of Lunar Eclipse. Book of Lunar Eclipse was first released in Lightning Overdrive as a secret rare in 2021, with it being one of the few to get a Starlight Rare printing in that same set. As I make this video, it has only received one reprint as a super rare in the 2022 Megatins marketed as the Tin of the Pharaoh's Gods, implying either that the Pharaoh worships different gods from everybody else, or that he owns them, which I guess is technically true in regards to the god cards, but it's still wild to hear them presented as his property, considering it's gods. This video is shorter and slightly random because I must be playing Halo 3 in my basement in 2007 because I am infected. And so I apologize for that. On topic, this is a quick play spell card with a simple effect. Discard one card, then target two face-up monsters on the field. Change them to face-down defense position. Now notably, this discard is as a cost, or a part of the cost, and is therefore not going to trigger any sort of effects that activate when discarded by card effect. That would include things like Shadow monsters, Tearlament monsters, and Dark World monsters. No effects for you when discarded by Lunar Eclipse. However, if it just needs to be discarded, that will trigger things such as dangers. That's not critical, but I felt I'd share. Yes, it's the Twin Twister of Book of Moon. And Twin Twister is a card that saw immediate play due to its usefulness and being a damn near perfect upgrade to the timeless Mystical Space Typhoon. MST is a 1-for-1, and Twin Twisters allows you to be a 2-for-2, or much more importantly, a 2-for-up-to-2. And if this chart from YGOTopDecks.com is anything to go by, you can tell Twin Twister saw plenty of play even at release up through to today. So you might think it's fair to assume that Lunar Eclipse would see play in a similar amount to the original Book of Moon. And as this fat-ass bar graph would show you, that's not even remotely the case. There are two main reasons for this, I think, and it starts with that key phrasing on Twin Twisters that's not on Lunar Eclipse, and it's the words "up to." Twin Twisters can target a single, individual one spell or trap card, which is key to allowing the card to be played with versatility. What if the opponent only has one spell or trap card in their back row, but you know you can win if your play can go through uninterrupted? What if they've got the godless abomination that is anti-spell fragrance in their back row, but they've activated it in your draw phase? Well, now you can use Twin Twister and blow that piece of shit off the field immediately, much like it needs to be blown the fuck out of this game. Why is that card still legal? Irrelevant, but important. Either way, in a situation, being able to destroy a single spell or trap card can be crucial, or important, or just simply good. But Lunar Eclipse targets two monsters. Mandatory, not up to, exactly two. If there's only one face-up monster on the field, you can't even attempt to activate the card. This is important because what if the opponent only has one monster, but it's got a negate on it that you want to force out? Some Sword Soul player that opened poorly or just doesn't know how to play and has ended on a single Baron or a single Chichao that will throw a wrench into your turn. Well, Book of Moon could out it, but Lunar Eclipse here can't because there's only one monster. Now, that's not the most common scenario, but it's an example where having versatility would improve this card, and the lack of versatility and use hinders it, unless you're a psychopath and you're willing to use your normal summon to function solely as a second monster to be able to activate this card. Not to mention that where Twin Twisters can equal out an advantage, taking two cards from your hand and or field, and to remove two cards from the opponent's field, Book of Lunar Eclipse here is just a straight -2 in terms of card advantage. There is absolutely more to the game than numbers, to be clear, and Book of Moon has seen play even up into today in spite of it being a strict -1. But a -1 is a lot easier to swallow than a -2. Is that a sex joke of some kind? God, I hope not. The point is, while there's versatility of use for Book of Moon or something like Twin Twisters, there's a lack of versatility for you, Lunar Eclipse, because that lack of up to in its text. And like I said, this doesn't clear the board, it'll only set monsters. Now, if you're looking for a quick play spell card that can set more than one monster, you can instead try Book of Eclipse, a tech that's seen play as far back as Necros format that Book of Moons the entire field without the need for a discard. There is the weakness of Book of Eclipse that will allow the opponent to Ash Blossom it, because it does include an effect that would allow a player to draw, but you might consider that a fair trade-off compared to needing the discard and needing your opponent's board to match your exact situation. And if you're looking for a mass Book of Moon that doesn't have a weakness to Ash, there's also, say, something like Swords of Concealing Light, which makes it so that the monsters the opponent controls are all set down for 2 turns and are unable to change their battle position. So even if you can't out them immediately, there's a bit of time to play with, since for the most part, they're going to be eating up slots in your opponent's monster zones, outside of, I guess, fusion decks, but that's, you're getting into specifics here, and I'm speaking broadly. And of course, there's the simple tried and true Book of Moon, the same effect, but on a 1 monster basis, a simple 1-for-1 instead of a tried 2-for-2 that doesn't require any sort of discard. Bait and negate, flip something to beat it over in battle, or flip something of your own to prevent you from taking damage, or to save your own monster by flipping theirs. However you want to use it, there are plenty of things that can be enabled for minimal investment off of Book of Moon. All of which I bring up to say Book of Lunar Eclipse isn't really filling a role that doesn't already exist. And I go back to Twin Twisters for the simple fact that it's clearly a sort of equivalent. Both are retrains of classic cards that double the effect of that card with a discard, added to keep it balanced. But like MST, Book of Moon has received a number of alternatives to compete for usage, and unlike Twin Twisters, the strength of the effect doesn't really match the cost to be played. Plus, Book of Eclipse is a card, and there's really just no getting around that. From what I can find, this card has had a total of 2 tops, both of them coming from YCS Lyon in 2023, funny enough. Both lists played it were on 3 of this and 3 of Eclipse in the side deck, because it's a solid enough going second card, broadly speaking, especially in the last tournament where Shizu was legal and also Kashtira was a deck. So it would have been really helpful for the odd Sprite deck or then new Kashtira deck to be sided in when not playing the Tier Mirror, I suppose. And while Lunar Eclipse would have a chance to shine against Kashtira theoretically, it simply couldn't beat the original Book of Moon. By the time the meta had settled and we had moved on to Kashtira, it was found that Book of Moon was simply the better card to deal with Kashtira boards by and large. If the Kash player went first, Book of Moon could set a copy of Kashtira Shangri-Ira. Then if any of your zones were unfortunately locked out, it would be reset by having that card Book of Moon. But if the Kash player had instead opted to play around, say, Nibiru, and ended only on a copy of Arise Heart, then Book of Moon can get rid of their Macrocosmos on legs. But if they played around Nib, then they also played around Lunar Eclipse, so playing Lunar Eclipse just wasn't that ideal. So forgive me for talking so much about so many cards that aren't Lunar Eclipse specifically in this video, but that's just the truth of this card, I feel. There are better cards to look at, and that's the reason why we don't really look at Book of Lunar Eclipse. Overall, I think this is a case of a card that isn't really bad, it's just not really good. The lack of an up-to on its text has doomed it, not from being too situational, but just simply being too rigid in its uses. It's not uncommon for an end board to have 2 monsters you wouldn't mind having flipped face down. But what is uncommon is for having 2 cards worth being discarded and removed from your hands to simply set 2 of the opponent's monsters. A third of your hand to bait a negate of sorts isn't exactly the big-brained Yu-Gi-Oh! That'll win you a YCS. And even if you gave this card the errata to include up to, it would still be in pretty direct competition with Book of Moon for that simple reason, because sometimes that discard can be a lot to ask for. And that's all without having mentioned that where spell and traps have always been susceptible to destruction, allowing a card like Twin Twisters to see play, monsters have technically become less susceptible to Book of Moon in the sense that Link monsters exist and cannot be set face down. And when a card like Book of Moon shines best these days going second, a card released in the modern day like Book of Lunar Eclipse is going to be weaker going second by the existence of Link monsters. It's not everything, but it is something. And really, that's probably the best goddamn summary of this card I can give you, isn't it? Like, it's not everything, but it's something. There are plenty of other cards that fill similar roles to it already. There's nothing really notable going on here, and truthfully, most of us are going to forget that the card exists by the time this video is done. And so, that is our look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Single Card History, Book of Lunar Eclipse. Stay tuned for our next video, and feel free to suggest some cards to review or what type of video you'd like to see. Don't forget to like, and as always, hit that subscribe button to impress your smoking Italian wife, and of course, so you too can be a true duelist.